sooner we start, the sooner we can end. All right. Janine, are we on? Okay. So good morning. I'm Judge Ronald Adrian. I have the honor of chairing this subcommittee on the juvenile courts programmatic thrust. And we are fortunate to be in a position where we can kind of do this work. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. Janine, you want to call a roll?
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Judge Adrian.
Here.
Ms. Yarham.
Here.
Ms. Gibbons.
Here.
Mr. Cross. Mr. Cross is absent at the moment. Judge McClellan. Judge McClellan is absent at the moment. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any public comment today?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has signed in.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from February 26th meeting?
Motion to approve. Second that.
Properly moved and seconded. Any readiness on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And the minutes from February 26th will stand approved. Under new business, we're going to bring the folks from the ACLU forward today for a presentation. And I'd ask that you come to the table and introduce yourselves.
Good morning. I'm Gabriella Celeste with the Schubert Center for Child Studies at Case Western Reserve University, along with colleagues from the ACLU and the Children's Law Center. We make up the Greater Cleveland Youth Justice Collective, and we appreciate you hearing from us again today. Our work has involved, we're a collaborative that's really seeking collective impact on behalf of kids who touch the justice system. We're funded through a grant from the Gun Foundation, and part of our work really just involves educating public leaders like yourself and trying to, importantly, amplify youth voice in that process, which is a big part of what we're here to talk with you about today. I did just want to, if you don't mind pulling up the PowerPoint, or is that something I do? Oh yeah, please say your names for the records as well.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Rosnick. I'm Policy Director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Ohio.
Hi, folks. My name is Pac Lader. I'm a Policy Strategist for the ACLU of Ohio.
Thank you. Okay, your PowerPoint is up, or are you going to start, Gabrielle?
Yeah, so just a little context, as part of the work a few years ago, our collective met with public leaders, including the mayor's office, the county council, the county executive's office, to really bring attention to issues. And we have here sort of a highlight, sort of top-level highlight of the kinds of things that we've been doing in our briefings with public leaders to really pay attention to, when it comes to young people, why age matters, how kids are less mature developmentally in ways that really call for a proportional and age-appropriate interventions, and really trying to encourage collaboration between the court, the city, and the county. So, of course, we were among the group that called for the creation of this subcommittee in the last year, and we've shared with you recommendations in previous letters. Before we get started today, we recognize that public safety is always top of mind, and we want to really reiterate that how our public leaders talk about kids matters. We hope that you can speak in ways that are measured and thoughtful, especially when we're talking about promoting safety and wellness. We continue to be discouraged by what we see as inaccurate and disproportionate attention on youth crime in the media, especially given the really valuable and I think effective work that the juvenile court has fostered in trying to support and divert kids. So it's vital not to really feed into misinformation and hype about youth crime, and to always be mindful of context. And with that, I did want to say that, of course, as upsetting as incidents of violence can be with kids, we actually know that the vast majority of crime is not committed by young people. And in fact, a deeper dive looking at Cleveland in particular, and the data in 2023 showed that it may be surprising for people to hear that kids make up about 4% of all arrests in the city of Cleveland. And when you look at violent offenses, they make up about 3%. Which isn't to say there isn't an issue, but it is like, let's keep this in perspective. And I think that's super important. If we care really about safety, we need to pay attention to the fact that adults really commit the vast majority of violent offenses. And this outsized attention to, youth crime does more harm than good. It makes our community members feel less empathetic, more fearful, of our kids. And actually that kind of fear-mongering and rhetoric then makes the community less likely to support the kinds of important programs that actually do work with kids and that we've seen the court with important state dollars, including reclaim-funded programs, really make a difference in the lives of young people. We need the public support. So when we talk about holding kids accountable, we should be doing it in ways that make sense, that are proportional when it comes to where they sit. So I think with all of that in mind, I just want to say that our group, as we share with you today, we want to also remind you that having restorative options available for healing and accountability, we believe will make all of our kids safer.
Can I, before you move
Yeah.
forward,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned a number of names of organizations when you were talking about the collaborative. Can you give me all of the names of the organizations that are in the collaborative, please?
It's just a collective. This is actually the Greater Cleveland Youth Justice Collective, made up of 3 organizations: the ACLU of Ohio,
Okay,
the Children's Law Center, and the Schubert Center for Child Studies at Case Western.
okay, thank you.
So with that, I want to make sure, as we said, part of our role is also to make sure that we elevate youth voice, and we're really excited to share with you today some of what we heard from kids directly to better understand their experience of safety and their ideas for how to really make our community safer for everyone. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Jocelyn.
Thank you very much. So what we put together for you today is about a 30-minute preview. We're going to very quickly talk about the problem that we were seeing and the potential solution we came up with. And then the vast majority of our time here with you this morning, we're going to share our focus group project, and you're actually going to hear what we heard from youth within the city of Cleveland. So to look forward, we have to look backwards, and we're going to go back to 2022. Our organizations were hearing a lot of negative buzz in the media and elsewhere. The tough on crime narratives were pervasive and oftentimes out there in the media and the public space with no context. And we felt that the narrative that was being portrayed didn't necessarily align with reality and what was really going on. It was almost as if the super predator language of the 90s was starting to slip back. So we decided to deepen our partnership. Our organizations have worked together on youth justice for years and years, really diligently since at least 2019. But in 2022, we said, okay, let's deepen our relationship and let's focus on public education and shifting the narrative around youth within the city of Cleveland. And we wanted to counter those false narratives and lay the foundation for treating all kids like kids.
You earlier had, I hate to interrupt, but I just want to make this point real quick. You've indicated that a number of youth that are involved in crime in Greater Cleveland, somewhere in the range of 4% and 3% when we're talking about violent crime?
So I'm talking about arrests for offenses. 4% make up all arrests, 3% for violent arrests.
And what's the source of?
Cleveland Division of Police data.
Okay, thank you.
And we're focused on the greater Cleveland area, but we're just using that as an example.
Right, thank you.
So thanks to some funding from the George Gunn Foundation, we were able to devise a focus group project where we were able to bring on consultants, Be4You Services based in Akron. Specifically, we worked with Dr. NJ Akbar and Dewan Wash to conduct focus groups with youth and young adults within the city of Cleveland. Because when we were thinking about the youth justice context here in Cuyahoga County and Cleveland specifically, one of the things that we realized is that the youth perspective and youth feedback and the youth voice was pretty hard to see anywhere. And so we wanted to spend our time and resources bringing that voice into the conversation, into the table. So our focus group project had a number of goals. I'm not going to read them all to you. You have copies of these slides. But we wanted to combat harmful rhetoric that was playing out in the public discourse. And we really wanted to uplift impacted youth perspectives and voice in the space with the end goal of fostering an understanding and empathy of young people among policymakers, the general public, everyone within the city of Cleveland. So one of the first questions we were confronted with was, who are we actually going to engage with? And we came up with 5 different priority levels for our focus group participants, from the highest priority to the lowest. The first category of youth were youth currently detained or incarcerated in a facility here in Cuyahoga County. And the second were youth that were recently released from detention in Cuyahoga County. And I do need to give a shout out to Ms. Givens and staff at the Juvenile Court and Detention Center, because they were critical in ensuring that this focus group project actually included the voices that we felt really needed to be heard the most. So thank you, Ms. Givens, for that. Our third category were youth who live in key zip codes. Each year, the Juvenile Court does come up with an annual report that includes somewhat of a heat map that shows the different zip codes where youth are being funneled into the juvenile court system. And we then worked with B4U Services to take that heat map and prioritize the zip codes from highest to lowest priority for our youth engagement. And then the fourth category are young adults 18 to 25 who were impacted themselves or formerly involved with the system. And last but not least, adults and caregivers that were in impacted communities as well. So this next slide shows you our engagement pool. We did have 61 total participants. We wanted to ensure our focus groups were a safe space and youth and young adults could tap out at any time if they needed to, based on the conversation and how they were feeling. So we did have a couple of youth that did step away, but in total we had 61 that fully engaged from start to finish. The gender breakdown was about 2/3 male, 1/3 female. For age, we did speak to 25, 17 and below, 29 of those young adults that were formerly involved, and then 7 that were 25 or older. Majority of those 7 were adults and caregivers. You can see we were successful in engaging with youth in those high priority zip codes. A vast majority, 2/3 of our focus group participants did come from those high priority zip codes in the heat map. And the pie chart on the right-hand side is showing demographic population group. So you can see in the lower right-hand side, we had 16 participants within the Juvenile Detention Center. We met twice with different boys groups and once with a girls unit group. We also engaged with 9 youth that were currently in a court program and 9 that were recently released. Again, you see the smaller handful of adults and parents at the top, and then the remainder, the last third of our focus group participants, didn't fit into any of those other categories. I do want to express that there is a data limitation. All of the information was self-reported and minimal. This was very confidential, very anonymous, and the information we have was self-reported from our participants. We do not have race or other categories. However, we can tell you from our researchers' observations and the demographic and zip codes we were pulling from, a vast majority of our participants were Black youth and Black young adults, and a majority were Black males. We wanted to engage with the people where they were, so we had 9 different focus groups at local community centers, at the Community-Based Intervention Center, and at the Cuyahoga County Juvenile Detention Center. We really didn't want to have young adults or youth traveling to a new place or an organization that they haven't been to before. So we utilized spaces that already existed within the city, like the Addison Library, the Huff Library, the Corey Rec Center, Collinwood Rec Center, and the LGBT Center of Greater Cleveland. And our last methodology slide for you includes all 15 questions that we used for the focus groups. Surprisingly enough, we were able to get through almost all 15 questions every time, so we're not comparing apples to oranges, it really is apples to apples. We weren't leading the youth and young adults in any direction. We were asking very broad questions like, what does safety mean to you? Describe your community. what are the adults, the media, stakeholders, et cetera, getting wrong about safety? And our personal favorite question that we love to ask, if you had a magic wand, what would you change today? And we're really excited to share the feedback that we got from youth with you today. We're going to go over a couple of the key themes that came to the top, as well as share some direct quotes from youth.
Thank you. So to start off, the wide sweeping of all of the questions had a single undercurrent, and is what does safety mean to you? And from what we got back from youth, it's that safety is complex. If you allow me, I'm going to read one of the quotes. Honestly, nothing makes me feel safer. I can feel safer with my family, but it ain't going to make me feel safer other than getting a gun. I can't really do that. I just gotta do what I gotta do. Stay in the house, try to stay sober. Jordan. So when youth were asked about their perceptions of safety, how they felt safety was in their community, it was far more than the absence or presence of violence. It was about having stability, trust, and a sense of peace in their communities. They expressed that safety is an elusive concept for them, that it doesn't have this singular meaning, and it can mean one thing one day, another thing the next day. And we had 33 youth highlighted their attempts to find safety through protective measures, through their community, through mentors, through sports and activities and arts and all these things. So youth were thinking about safety on a very deep level and what these different aspects of their lives mean towards their safety. And so as we go through this conversation, all of the key themes have that presence underneath them. What we're going to talk about ranges from a bunch of different things, but safety is really what we were getting at in the presentation or in the focus groups. So guns have a dual role. The conversation around guns was present in all of these focus groups. It feels like you have to choose between being a target or having protection. Fred. Guns were seen as both a major contributor to unsafety and violence in their community, but also as their only means of protection. Youth felt they had to carry to feel safe. They felt they had to carry because of the presence of guns in their communities, the prevalence of them. But they voiced frustration over this fact. They did not feel as they wanted to have the gun. They felt like it was something they had to do, but felt a lot of trepidation about it. They felt unsafe carrying it themselves. It was just this threat of violence compelled them to continue to carry a gun.
So, I mean, the undercurrent of grief and loss that was laid bare in these conversations was really pervasive. Over 60% of the kids describe losing at least one and sometimes multiple people to violence. But beyond the statistics, I think really seeing their words helps us understand how what this does to our kids, how it, quote, makes them scared for their community and what kind of future they have, as Tina said. There was almost a sense of resignation, quite honestly, in the voices that we heard. Tina went on to say, grief is just a part of everyday life for us. David, one of the young adults, makes clear this direct link between loss and this lack of feeling safe. If you look at David's quote, every time I lose someone, it feels like a part of me is gone too. How can you feel safe when that keeps happening? Terrence, who's on probation and lost both his dad and his little brother, conveys how these losses after losses after losses take a profound emotional toll on them. And I think the quote by Fred really captures how debilitating this kind of loss can be. He talks about just being exhausted. What became devastatingly clear to us in many of the voices of our young people is not just that they've experienced tremendous loss, but that they're still hurting. And they don't feel there's a safe place for them to make sense of their grief to really heal. And how these losses really heighten their sense of fear and their sense of vulnerability. But also how the grief extends beyond the loss of loved ones to this sense of lost childhood, of missing out on experiences that one kind of thinks of when we think of normalcy, with our children. Another, I think we all understand when we're working with kids, young people who are touched by the justice system in particular, these are kids who've experienced trauma. But what these conversations really revealed was how so many of our kids actually connect their pain to generational trauma, which I don't think we expected. They see it as an experience and experience this directly as a weight on them. As Marcus, one of the young adults, put it, we're just never really free from it. In fact, over 2/3 of the young women who participated themselves raised this idea of generational cycles of trauma, and they talk about this emotional toll of systemic neglect and violence, and particularly its impact on families. Here we hear Gloria reveal how this undermines her sense of being able to protect her own children from this generational burden. Another key insight from these groups is how they consistently connected mental health challenges to unresolved generational trauma, underscoring how this grief and loss really perpetuate, the cycle of harm. And another reoccurring theme we, heard was this normalization, frankly, of trauma, making it hard for youth to really seek support. Several girls talked about not having adults believe them. For example, one talked about a social worker coming into her home, and she said, could see right under her nose that there were clear signs of abuse, but she just left her there. And she said, the sense of being left there over and over again to experience this makes me feel like adults can say that they care, but they really have to take the time to make a connection and show up for kids to see what they're going through to be of any help, which is directly linked to how young people desire effective, mental health care, but many of them talk about the need for mental health programs, therapy, counseling, support groups, but they need their workers to be empathetic, especially to this idea of understanding the generational nature of trauma in order to actually be a true source of healing in their lives. People who essentially get them, right? So this theme was pervasive. Another theme that we looked at is this idea, did I skip it? Protective factors? Oh, no, sorry. Protective factors. And, young people themselves are actually powerful sources for their own healing. They still need caring adults in their lives equipped with this empathetic understanding. But here we just listed a few of the many examples of what kids themselves use to take care of themselves: art, music, writing, sports, helping others to care for themselves. I love how Aaron, the last one here, a kid who's actually was in the JDC, says, creating something from nothing is my way of pushing through hardships. I just think that's powerful. There were many quotes like this. But also the power of adults in a young person's ecosystem can't be overestimated. I know this is a long quote here, but I want to read this quote from Vera, also another girl in the JDC, because I think it poignantly conveys this. When asked if she had a magic wand, what she would be the one thing she would change, she said, I would rewind the way adults address us when wrong is being done. Instead of coming at us, crazy or hurting us physically or putting on harsh punishments, I feel like they should come at us stern, strict, but with love, and telling us, come on, I got you. You need help. I'm going to pick you up every time you fall down. Try it again. We're going to keep trying and trying no matter how many times you fall down. You ain't going to stay on that ground. You're going to get up and you're going to keep pushing. You can't stay there. This is words from this young girl that I think are really powerful, and I think we'd all agree would make things better for everybody. And then I want to just point out another complicated theme was around community culture. On the one hand, our kids frequently describe community as a source of connection and pride, or connection and identity. There's pride in their neighborhoods and where they come from, and that gives them a strong sense of belonging. So when community support systems are present, which I think this group has some opportunity to sort of lift up, they can really serve as critical anchors, for our youth. And this comes out in quotes like these from Tim and Brad. We support each other through tough times. There's still a lot of good in our community. But there's also a recognition that too often our kids feel unprotected and undervalued in our communities, like Janice, who shares here, and Aaron, when he talks about feeling like a target, which we actually heard from too many kids. So the consequence of not just a lack of safety, but the missed opportunity for investing in our kids, I think is expressed here also by Jay, when he says it's just hard to focus on something like education when your environment is chaotic. So while, we can't necessarily fix all of the problems that come with a historical disinvestment in too many of our neighborhoods that contribute to things like poverty and, trauma and poor health, lead poisoning, but Cece reminds us that having someone to talk to, like a trusted, caring mentor, does make our kids feel less alone. 3/4 of our participants expressed frustration with the absence of basic resources and safe spaces, recreational opportunities, positive mentors, which they view themselves as really essential for safe and thriving communities. They frequently tied the infrastructure to this broader feelings of neglect and disempowerment, noting these gaps in resources perpetuate cycles of vulnerability and crime in their communities. So safe and fun recreational spaces and mentorship opportunities were reoccurring solutions that we heard proposed by our kids.
Yeah, go ahead.
So excuse me, I'm Marvin Cross.
Yes, Ms.
When you said feel like a target by who?
Yeah, well, and I can invite any of my colleagues to share back here, but basically, they were talking about law enforcement. They're talking about other adults who make them feel unsafe when they're walking places. They're talking potentially about other young people.
Yeah, I would add to that I personally attended the girls unit focus group at the JDC, and some of the conversation was that the youth felt set up to fail almost. Like they did have a target on their back. They also expressed frustration with a lack of resources, places to go, and people to speak to help them make the right choices when they were feeling vulnerable. I know this was several slides ago now, where the dual role of guns, but I will just note that we didn't ask for opinions or feedback on guns. We were only talking about the community and safety, and it came up almost immediately in all of the focus groups, including the girls' focus group, which shows that there really is a pervasive issue across the city, and I don't think Cleveland or Cuyahoga County is unique. I think this is something that's happening right now. But the feeling of having a target, as Gabriella was saying, it's not just in one context or one arena. It's feeling like they're set up to fail. It's stakeholders, law enforcement, but also other youth and others in the community itself.
So I grew up in the inner city. And I spoke on this once before. When I was growing up, we had recreation centers, we had PAL, we had extracurricular activities after school, outside different sources. Now all those things are gone or very limited, so the kids are not going to just disappear. They're going to have to do something. And it's a societal issue. That's why I asked that question, because I kind of understand that by growing up there and still working in that area. So it is pretty pervasive.
Patrick, you had something to add?
Yeah. No, you're fine. And to your point, Mr. Cross, it's not in our slides, but another theme that was present was youth speaking towards the infrastructure of their communities, these places to go. They spoke to the fact that they don't feel like there are areas or places or things set up for them to be teens. They spoke to this idea of like, there are things for little kids, there are things for adults. But what do we do when we're teens and the park doesn't feel safe or these places don't feel safe and we don't have these avenues for us to be ourselves in? And it also ties into this piece about social media. Yeah, absolutely.
So I seen on here you had 2 recreation centers.
Mhm.
Is those the only 2 recreation centers that you're working with?
So the recreation centers were the sites where the focus group happened. they weren't necessarily like where we didn't source youth through the recreation centers. It was like they were housed there. Youth were sourced through like other teen agencies and
Okay,
things like that.
and the reason I say that is because I do have a meeting coming up with the Recreation Department, because they got rec centers all over the city, and we keep hearing about transportation problems getting people to and from. So I think the recreation centers teaming up with these different groups would probably help on a lot of directions. So once I get through meeting with them, I'll give it to group and they can distribute it to however it need to be. But that's why I grew up in recreation centers.
Can I just quickly, so one of the things that we hear often from our kids is some challenges, there aren't transportation options. To Marvin's point, school, right, like a lot of our schools don't provide our middle and high school age kids busing. And so that walk sort of to and from school, to and from the rec center, to and from the grocery store is a lot of the reason why our kids aren't leaving the houses and or leaving their blocks and neighborhoods, which sometimes perpetuates that, like, I don't feel safe in the playground, I don't feel safe. And so I was going to ask, and I'm glad to see you do have a slide on social media. There's also this immediate access, right? Like Johnny's at the park, now you know where to find him. That gets out much quicker now than it had been. So I see that's your next slide, so I don't want to jump the gun, but I'm sure you have, some things there. But those are some of the same things we're hearing from our kids in residential and detention.
Yeah. Ms. Nerham, that is absolutely correct. We heard about that directly from youth, that it's not necessarily that resources don't exist. They do desire more and more that are close by in more neighborhoods, in more communities, but they recognize there are, some opportunities out there, but it's, whether they can actually get there safely. Is it within walking distance? If it's not, do they have transportation? Also, do they have an at-home care provider that would support them going? These were real things that did come up in the conversation. And Mr. Cross, we'd love to talk to you afterwards to get connected to rec centers to see what ideas you have, because part of phase 2 of this project is to re-engage with youth, to ask more questions on what changes they actually do want to see in the community in terms of program and things like that. And we would welcome any opportunity to partner on that.
And I will talk to you afterwards, and like, I can't make the commitment for them, but it's worth having a communication with them. And I know a lot of the top officials, so I think they're more than willing to talk to us.
So yeah, on to the social media burdening our youth. Youth spoke to that point of feeling like social media is all-encompassing in their lives, and it wasn't just social media, but it was all media. So the quote from Carl says, "I hear about crimes on Instagram, YouTube, outside, the news, specifically the Cleveland Remembrance page. Yeah, a numerous number of places." Youth did not feel they could escape these feelings, that it enveloped everything they did and everywhere they went. And this idea that they could have never shut it off, that if they didn't see it on the news, they would see it on Instagram. If they didn't see it on Instagram, somebody would tell them. And then it also, other youth brought up these pieces of seeing threats and seeing violence and seeing all of these things happening all the time, re-traumatized them, gave them these feelings of unsafety, or in many cases, seeing people they know, people they care about be harmed, or and not knowing how to deal with or what to do with those feelings afterwards, like Gabriella talked about with this feeling of trauma and loss. They saw that these narratives were being pushed about their communities and about these people that they loved and cared about, and they felt like it was untrue, like it wasn't a full representation of their communities, but everything that was highlighted was so negative, and they wanted to see more positive things out there about them, about their communities, and about their lives. And then we did have a lot of robust conversation around racial and economic disparities that harmed them. Youth were very direct in how they felt about law enforcement and how they felt about public officials. Youth felt disempowered. They associated police presence not with safety, but with surveillance. they had a real distrust for these systems. And they felt as Black or youth of color that they were unfairly targeted by these systems. Male participants spoke about direct confrontation with law enforcement, direct stories of feeling harmed by law enforcement. And then young girls spoke to seeing these things happen with less direct stories, though there were some, but then feeling this sense of responsibility for their communities. They felt like they had to take care of everyone in the community after things like this happened, and just felt a large sense of pressure. And they connected their racial disparities along with economic disparities. They felt as like poor people in the community, they were being targeted, and they had, again, that target on their backs. And then, truth be told, youth spoke to how Cleveland itself was failing them. Marty said, "Cleveland ain't safe for us. I feel like I have to leave to breathe and not always look over my shoulder." Youth, in not every case, but in many cases, said that Cleveland has failed them, that they did not feel safe, that they did not know they would ever feel safe in Cleveland, and that they felt compelled to leave. This is not the last slide. We're going to get to some positive things you said, but I do think this is a call to action for all of our public leaders to see that our youth are struggling and they don't know if they can make a home here.
Or were they talking about Cleveland proper, or they were talking about Greater Cleveland?
Greater Cleveland. Yeah. In the girls unit, I can say that there was a robust conversation about this, and there was a lot of interactive dialogue between the focus group participants that some could leave and some couldn't. And so they felt almost like an obligation to stay to try to help and caregive and make things better. But there was like a real desire and draw to just go somewhere better and safer from their perspective. And I know that this is a difficult conversation. We're sharing exactly what we heard from youth. I promise we are now on the upswing. We have 2 more slides where we're sharing some what we see as positive statements and positive feedback from the youth and young adults we engaged with. Before I go into the quotes on the slide, I want to share that over 1/3 of our focus group participants linked a mistrust of leadership and law enforcement and really the current Greater Cleveland community to a lack of investment in their communities and a lack of resources. And they talked about a rooted perception that they had, which was basically boiled down to a lack of community-centered leadership from their perspective and a lack of youth voice in many of the conversations that would then be shaping their own lives. And so we gathered some feedback from the youth, and really there was a strong theme for a desire to be included in decision-making, to have a seat at the table, to be welcome into spaces where these types of dialogues are taking place, where policy decisions are being made that affect them and their lives. You can see the quote from Theo, "If we're not included, how can we trust the system to work for us?" Linda, "Youth voices matter, but we're never given a seat at the table." These types of quotes happen time and time again during the focus groups, which we see as a big positive, that the youth are eager for more engagement.
And we just really want to end by noting that despite the many hardships, and remember, we talked to some, deep end kids in this process. So despite these hardships and the ways some of them have repeatedly, fallen down, they're hopeful. That's really good news. They've got dreams for their own futures. They see themselves as positive forces for their communities and their own lives. They aspire to learn. They want to work hard. They want to be part of, this job creation economy, and they want to be good role models for others. I think you can see from these quotes here. I mean, it was hard to choose from all the quotes we saw, but I love this idea of I dream of becoming an entrepreneur and creating opportunities, for others. I look up to people who've succeeded despite the odds. They want to be those people. So we think their stories are being, continue to be written, and that you all get to be a part of, helping them be successful. So with that, we just want to leave this with a question, where we go from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is extremely useful, and we were really planning to do some of the same work that you've done here, but I think that you've done it well enough that we may be just kind of plumbing the depths, because this is just the overview, if I understand you correctly. This is not the totality of what you got from kids doing the various things that you, the various sessions that you had with them. So I think that we'd want to have more.
That's right, Judge. And we do hope we captured all the themes that we heard, but having, 60-plus conversations, of course, there's
Hundreds
more
of
details.
pages. There are hundreds of
192 pages, I think, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, we may, like I said, we probably are going to need to include more of what you were able to do, because it's more than what I think that we'd be able to do in the time that's allowed,
Yeah.
to us. This is very, very helpful.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to, thank you for taking the time and for doing the work that you did on this project. I am grateful that you guys were able to conduct these focus groups, get feedback from the youth, specifically youth that come into contact with our youth justice system. When you really look at some things that, I think the last slide about key themes and aspirations and hopes for their future is my favorite slide. But it's interesting, every single one of them talked about, learning a trade, getting my diploma, becoming an entrepreneur, and career training. And I look up to people who have succeeded despite the odds. That theme around education and opportunity is really strong, and I think this is also a place that I would agree with is a hard place for us to really get a handle on. And it feels, and I will say I've been working alongside of Cleveland Division of Police doing some focus groups in communities, and those, you think are going to be tough, but they've been really phenomenal. And one of the things that's happened every time we've gone out is community members, I think there's this, what news organizations think communities want to hear versus what community really wants to be a part of. And there's huge disconnect there. Sure, demonizing young people or the youth justice system for failing kids is certainly a theme, but I think when we go and we talk with community members, at the end of it, they're coming up to us and saying, hey, what about this program? What if we did this? Here's my business card. Let's talk. We were at, a local arts organization, and the person came down and said, we would really love to be part of the solution here for young people. So I think the importance of getting youth voice at the table and community voice at the table, because there's this misperception of what I think local organizations, news organizations think people really want to hear. Community members I've met with have really wanted to be part of the solution. But I think this is the other thing. I had another man come up to me and ask, man, you have these kids who want jobs, and we have organizations who want to hire people and want to train them and pay them really well, and they can, specifically around trades, and we do have some great opportunities for people to be employed, and employers looking for people with that training. And these young people, that's the theme. I want to have a job. And then I'll just say one thing, because I will put together some organization to my thoughts here. But, things they talked about as needs, trusted spaces or safe spaces, trusted adults, mentors, recreation, music, arts and sports, connection to opportunities such as securing jobs. I think about that, and I think about my own kids, and check, right? And if we can figure out how to do that for some of these kids, I think the real answer to reducing gun violence and youth crime is checking those boxes. and investing in those resources. So I think that's something I would like for us, I think we're just scratching the surface. We've got mentors, we've got credible messengers coming on board. We do have some linkage to jobs and opportunities, but we don't have businesses at the table with us. We don't have people who can hire. Yes, we can teach something, but I think that's like a missing component. Like, getting people from the trades to the table with these young people and helping job mentor them into it, So I just really appreciate you guys taking the time and, elevating these issues. And I agree. It's another growth opportunity we have is getting young people to the table and keeping them at the table to have their voice where there's policies and decisions being made or funding decisions, we should have them present. So thank you for at least starting the conversation on that. I didn't really have a question.
If I may say something else. So I was commander of community policing for the Cleveland Division of Police. And one of the things that I would suggest, Ms. Gibbons spoke about the police department, and I hear about the mistrust. I get it. I understand it. But if you contact the different district commanders, they have groups and they have the community policing. It's not as large as it used to be, but they have kind of, instead of having a regional line, they put it all out in a different district. So you got 5 different districts that cover the whole city of Cleveland. If you talk to call the commander's office, they will help you put something together on that. I like I said, I can't commit to it, but I'm still affiliated with them, and I know that's some of their goals that they want to do in order to bring the community closer. And we got all these different groups that are doing things but they do nothing together. You have your own agenda, this group has their own agenda, and it's not negative, but we don't get together where it can really make a difference. And I just think those are some things that need to be done, bring people together, and I think it'll have a lot more effect when the groups start working together.
Can I dig a little bit deeper into the demographics of the folks that you spoke to? How many separate focus groups were there again?
There were 9.
There were 9. And are all of the people that you talked to people who were in one way or another justice system involved, or were there other members of the community?
A majority of them were system involved, and we chose to take a broad definition. Every single person was system impacted because they all lived in the communities or were a caregiver or were formerly involved when they were a youth themselves. So everyone touched the system in some way, but it may not have been that they personally had been through the juvenile legal system.
And there's a slide, I think, early on that breaks down exactly which group.
I raised the issue because it seems to me, just listening to you, that almost all of us are justice system impacted. So trying to figure out exactly, which slice you got was interesting.
The judge, I think that's a very fair way to say it. 100% of the participants were impacted, not 100% were involved.
Okay.
But the target, the zip codes were from areas where there was a higher proportion of kids who got involved in the justice system. So kids from the juvenile detention center made up a portion, kids who have been released from the detention center, kids from those target zip codes, young adults who themselves have been involved in the system and had more distance, and then caregivers in those zip codes. So not justice impacted in the way all of us may be, but very much more so, I think, targeted.
I do have a sheet in front of me here that has the zip code breakdowns. I'd be happy to give you this copy.
Appreciate it.
So, given that, our group is working towards like winding down our meetings and working towards recommendations and a work plan to provide to county council to consider. Do you have some recommendations based on the youth feedback that you would like to elevate today to us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the voices from the kids actually reinforce the 3 recommendations that we made earlier, but in particular, the fact that the matter is that the county has a responsibility for these kids in addition to the city and in addition to the court. And our largest recommendation is recognizing that when the county chooses to make some investments in neighborhoods and in neighborhood resources, that with an eye toward what young people in particular really need, that is a critical piece of this in terms of prevention for a number of these kids, or reentry kinds of support. So just, I think we laid out some specifics around that. I encouraged you all to take a look at what the court is already doing, because of course the court is doing quite a bit in terms of diversion and intervention, but where there are really gaps. And I think the kids helped us identify where some of those gaps are and where the county could provide additional resources to what the court already has to help to meet those gaps.
Yes, and the only thing that I would expand on is really looking at the heat map, looking at the zip codes. It's from the Juvenile Court's annual report. You can see the communities that are in the most need, and taking a look at the resources and investments that are happening there or not, and using that to determine prioritization. Where can we have a new rec center, or not a new rec center, but more programs in that rec center? Where can we contribute more to things like boys and girls clubs? I think that all of the clues are out there. We just need to put them together. But I think that the heat map and looking at those key zip codes can be really useful.
Thank you.
I think it's probably important to also look at what's available in terms of public transportation or other options to get kids there. Like, do the rec centers have a shuttle bus or something? Because for so many of our kids, obviously families don't have reliable transportation. We've talked about the safety in the community, but I think transportation is a real barrier for so many of our kids. And so could we find a way to help them get to the job training center, to the rec center safely?
An idea that actually came out of one of our other, totally agree with that, absolutely. But one of our presentations, so we've shared this with the court and with the city, and wanted to share with you all, but was that kids themselves maybe could play a really strong role on the social media side, and in trying to counter all of the, just the Cleveland Remembrance page and kind of negativity. What would they do for a local kind of Greater Cleveland campaign for young people on social media, and this would really absolutely require the work of young people. We can't do this. So that's another area that I'd encourage us, the county, to look at how to support something like that.
I think some of those sites take away we have HIPAA for healthcare and things like that, but if you look at Cleveland Remembrance page, you automatically have a name, you know who they are, then it puts the family, I think that's a place where maybe parent advocacy could have a big role too, because there's so much out there right away that otherwise, would have been protected information.
Yeah, sorry, and I do want to reiterate something we said at the very beginning, which is, in terms of a recommendation, is how our public leaders continue to talk about kids and young people and not feeding into misguided media hype, or what we see, on the prosecutor's page, where we see youth crime highlighted in a way that disproportionately suggests that kids are responsible. It just, again, it undermines our sense of safety. It undermines the community's desire to sort of see these kids as all our kids, and their support for the important kind of programming that we need. So we would encourage that to be part of your recommendations as well.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and your effort, and as I said, we're going to want to, I started to say purloin, more of your report so that we can add it, because we think it needs to be in the public domain. Okay, thank you. Okay. Are you guys leaving? Okay, so it's 11:58. So I don't know what your availability is, but since we're together, and rather than calling another meeting together, if we can hang around, I wanted to start to have the discussion about the form and format of the final report. I looked at what Bridget had put together initially some time ago, and then kind of updated a little while ago. And I juggled some things around, and I wanted to get input from all of you as it related to the original, and then the rework, and then the proposed edits, in order to see if I got it right, or if it needs to be reworked in some other kind of way, and then to start to figure out exactly if we need to engage in certain kinds of divisions of labor in order to fill in the blanks. This is sort of like put together as a sort of just not even a template. It's more like a skeleton upon which we could use, because it's always been, in my experience in the past, that most of the time when you come into a meeting, it's better to have something to pick at than to try to develop something out of whole cloth at your first instance. So I'm opening the floor at this point just to the three of you to see what your reactions were, and whether or not other changes need to be made, or whether it needs to be reordered.
From the document? Oh, yeah, so as I had emailed earlier, maybe I might have used the wrong word, template or whatever, but it gives us a start that at least we can go down each section to see, should it be reorganized, or do we just fill in the necessary areas if it suffice what our group, our target is. That was my feelings.
So it looks like, thank you so much for taking a stab at this. My thought on this was, the idea of thinking for long-term for folks, if they want to go in, organizing it, broken down by meeting, so that people understand how we came to the findings and recommendations that we have. And I like things to be as simple as possible, so thank you, Janine, for your work on getting everything linked to the website so that we can just have hyperlinks on everything. We don't have to go into, set it up with a meeting one until our last meeting, and in there, any letters that were public comments, we could put as a hyperlink. The video of the actual meeting itself, hyperlink, that way if they want to take a look at, well, what did so-and-so say when they came and presented? And then it looks like you moved up the idea of like what was the methodology, the findings, and then the recommendations up front, and then using sort of the back as like, here's your reference. So I appreciate that. I like that idea. I do know that our court was asked at the judicial one to make some recommendations from our judges, so there will be more coming from them. So we'll send that put that as just a link to it, and then our committee will be, tasked with what are the recommendations that we believe are appropriate and should be made to county council at the end. So I like how you pushed it up to the front. I prefer that.
Okay. As I was looking at it, I was saying I was afraid that people might get lost in the weeds if they were looking at each of the individual meetings first. Yeah. And by the time they got down to the really important stuff, then
Just get to the first 2 pages.
yeah. Okay. And also, if you look at it, the first piece that I wanted to really highlight was the thing about us trying to decide on an executive summary of the pertinent findings that we absolutely end up with. And then they can find the rest of it, in the body of the work. But for the majority of people, and I hate to be so cynical, but history teaches that most people want a quick and dirty. So the summary, I think, is going to be really the most important piece that we come up with.
So I wholeheartedly agree about that. So I do a lot of reports, investigations, and if you're dealing with the C-suite people, they're not gonna wanna go through. So I do a lot of executive summaries, and they know they can refer, if there's an area that they're concerned with, they can go, just like what you're saying, go down to the area and look into the meat and potatoes. But otherwise, just, they wanna know what it is, good, bad, or the ugly, but at least they have it there if they wanna go further.
Yeah, it's a kind of a dragnet approach, right?
Yeah.
The facts, just the facts.
Just the fact, yeah. Adam 12, just the fact.
Jennifer? It turned off.
Off on myself. All right, it's been one of those days. No, I think you've laid it out nicely. I agree that putting sort of the summary toward the end is probably better. I think, next steps are really looking at what are our recommendations and really how, detailed do we need to be so that there's a lot out there. And so I worry maybe we want to be careful we don't have too large of an umbrella of categories, and that if we really have things that we feel passionately about, that we make those their own individual bullet points and not sort of under the broad umbrella of like court programs or, and by that I mean like if we're going to recommend more family and home-based programs, then, we should probably identify what some of those are or kind of take it a layer down.
So as far as like maybe division of labor, because I'll be honest with you, we started in the summer and yeah, so I don't really remember everything. So I've been like,
Remember that?
I know, not the details. So maybe it might be helpful if we just take a couple of us, like I've started from meeting 1 to kind of just put in the bullet point of recommendations and themes that came up in meeting 1, just to kind of go through this appendix part. And then once we all sit down and identify some of the themes, the things that we can agree on, then we can make our recommendations from there. So maybe finalizing that appendix where we're just like for meeting 1, I've only gotten to public. I'm really moving snail's pace on this. Like I've got through public comment. So, but just kind of summarize those things. And then, if everybody else wants to take a couple meetings and then rewatch, go through, pull back out themes, recommendations, concerns. Maybe we just stick to like themes, recommendations, and concerns highlighted. And then we can kind of all come together with all the appendices finished and then make their recommendations.
We don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
We are really, really pressed because even though they gave us an extension
Right.
until the end of May in order to make this happen, given the number of meetings that we have had over a period of time, it means that all of us are going to have to put the whip to the horse in order to get through this. Because like you said, if you just got through public comment on the first meeting.
Well, that was between meetings at work, so I didn't a lot of time to it, but yeah.
Yeah, oh my God.
So do we need to commit to a couple meetings?
Yeah, that's gonna
Maybe a
be,
piece?
that's gonna be something we're gonna do. Yes.
Judge Joe Nani with the county council. As you know, Laura Black normally attends, and she's on a well-deserved vacation. But I will also say that she has also expressed that she can be helpful to you guys as well on this. And she's very organized, and I think that maybe even when she gets back, if she could give you a call, Judge, just to kind of talk to you about how she can help you compile this in a way that's making sense, because you guys are all very busy as well, and we wanted to have Laura Black available to you to assist on some of these things. Obviously, she can't do it all, but she can filter your thoughts and what you guys want to see in something here.
That would be
So I want to
Yeah.
offer that assistance to make it a little bit more easier to get through, and it should be available to you.
I really appreciate that, Joe. Anything that's gonna allow us to get organized.
Yes.
With some degree of rapidity.
So when she returns, so she'll be back, I think, at the end next week. I'll sit down with her and maybe just set up a sidebar meeting with you, just to make sure that we're available in the way that you want us available to you.
I think it'd also be helpful for us to just kind of pull together maybe, the meeting minutes and go through instead of, we might not have time to watch entire meetings, but what are the recommendations? What were the highlights at each meeting? We kind of already have that piece organized, and then we can work with Laura to get it more detailed.
Okay.
So probably, I think we can manage with Laura on an email thread, just divvying up tasks. Because I will be honest, I have another large project that has been dropped in my lap with a very quick turnaround timeframe.
I don't know why they do that
So, but yeah, I think it's just allotting time on the calendar and sitting with it. So if we can just jump on the email thread, divvy that up and get that done within maybe the next 2 weeks.
2 weeks is precedent,
Yeah.
but I think that if, we'll say within the next 2 weeks, because I'd like to do it quicker than that. But as soon as Laura gets back, she and I have some conversation, and we'll be in touch with you as quickly as possible thereafter, and we can go from there.
Then we would each get like an area or something to look at, because I don't wanna go and look at
Yeah, we'll divvy
appendix
them up.
2 and 3.
If I'm already
And
doing
then you're
it.
already
Yeah.
doing 2
We'll-
and 3.
We'll divide and conquer.
Okay, I'll take whatever recommendation you guys say you want me to do.
Perfect.
And I'll tell Laura, cancel vacation, come on back, you know
Mhm.
what's going on here. See, so.
We got you a big job.
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
Well, and more than one of these meetings was your presentation, Bridget, so, and you kind of put that all together on the programs that the court has, so it would make sense to
Yeah,
assign
that's an
that to someone
easier
else, yeah.
So that was 2 and 3? Do those.
Okay. All righty, is there anything else for the good of the order? Where am I? Is there any new business, other new business that is? Any old business? Any other miscellaneous business? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I would make the motion to adjourn, Your Honor.
Second?
It's probably moved and seconded that we adjourn. Is there any unreadiness on the motion? Any unreadiness on the motion? Any unreadiness on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.